Hey everybody, this is Cameron here, one of the co-founders of TechnoTutor, and I'm going to be doing a little live stream today on, as you can see from the description of the video, well, if I can pull it up here, the future of homeschooling, and discussing the differences between homeschooling, schooling, and educating children at home. I'm also going to look at some of the current conversation around homeschooling. Also going to go into some of the stats and stuff that I just pulled up quickly about the difference between children who are homeschooled versus children who go to school. But then also just some of the uncertainty about how children are going to be educated in the near future and what's really at stake. Because especially with everything going right now, as you know, obviously if you're watching live, you know it's right in the middle of this whole pandemic thing. If you're watching this video later, then now you know. But there's a lot of discussion, obviously, around how are children going to be educated? Are they going to go to school? And whether kids go back to school or not, there's definitely a shift that's happening right now. And especially knowing a lot of people in the education system, as I do, and I've been talking to them, I can see that there's definitely some things that are shifting and probably some permanent changes that are going to be happening and things that people really need to know. Now, I will tell you just briefly, I'm using a new recording software for streaming into Facebook, and then this will be recorded and uploaded to YouTube later. But for those of you on the live feed, if you can't hear me at some point or you can't see something that I'm saying you should be able to see on the stream, just send me a comment. I don't know how real time the comments are, but I'll do my best to use that feedback. So hopefully after this stream, I'll have figured out this software completely, although I think I've got it all worked out, so we'll see. Okay, but just keep that in mind. Don't be afraid to say something if something doesn't seem right or if you can't hear me or something like that. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into it. Let me pull up what I have here. Okay, I'm going to start with, let me switch the scene here. I'm going to start with this. Because this is something that I don't know how many people are aware of this, whether you're a homeschooler or whether have kids in school or whatever it is you're doing. If you're a parent, you really need to know about this. And if you're not a parent, you really still need to know about it, because the way we educate the children right now is going to affect your life in 15, 20 years and so forth, because they're going to be the ones who are doing all the work and everything and contributing to society and everything. So this is really important, whether you're a parent or not. But if you are a parent with kids in school, I really wanted to bring this to your awareness, because this was from November of 2019. I don't know if you can see my cursor or not. I'm going to assume not, but I was highlighting the fact that it's November 12, 2019, and it says, National Reading Emergency, educators sound the alarm. Not only did scores drop for students in many states, but the achievement gap is widening. It says students in the U.S. are getting worse at reading, and a dozen education and civil rights organizations sound the alarm of what they say is a national crisis. The clarion call comes after the reading scores dropped amongst fourth graders in 17 states and eighth graders in 31 states. The achievement gap between highest performers and lowest performers grew. And I just wanted to show you a quick example of that. Basically what they've been saying now is that the reading scores and so forth for students are the lowest that they've been since the 90s. Oh, here it goes, right here. While scores are still up in math compared to 1990, students are largely back to square one when it comes to reading, other than the highest performing students. Let me just address that point briefly with math. The problem there is it's kind of a false sense of security, because how can your understanding of math be going up if your reading ability is going down? And so the problem is it's easier to teach to a math test than a reading test. It's easier to get a student to memorize something and repeat it than it is to test their understanding. It's easier to test that because you just get the right answer or you don't. It's a multiple choice question, for example. My background being mathematics, I studied mathematics at university, so did my wife, Katie, and I tutored for many, many, many years, over a decade. I tutored primarily math, also science and reading and SAT, verbal and math. I've tutored everything, programming, organic chemistry, you name it, I've tutored it. But my primary focus was math, not so much because that was my strength. Although I'm pretty good in terms of explaining and doing high school and elementary and middle school math, but because that's the highest demand. Typically, there's a much higher demand for math tutors than there are, you know, English tutors or writing tutors and things like that. Typically, students feel like, or parents rather, feel like they can help their kids with an essay, but if they can't remember algebra, they just can't remember it. So it's a high demand for that, and things like chemistry and physics and stuff like that. There's also a very high demand for those subjects for tutoring. But my point is, I'm just giving you my background so you can understand when I'm saying that that doesn't add up. The fact that math scores are up, if reading is down, I'm telling you from the perspective of someone who tutors math or tutored math and has a math background and so forth. I understand mathematics. Um, it's because they're able to test memorization more easily, right? So you can have a student who can memorize how to solve a problem, but if you give them something novel, they can't do it in math, right? So don't let that fool you and think, oh, okay, cool, like we're doing really well with math. That's good, right? That's really good. No, it's not good. Um, so I just wanted to point that out. But another thing I wanted to point out here too is this part right here, which says it's the NAEP, they call it the Nation's Report Card, tests more than 600,000 fourth and eighth graders in public and Catholic schools in math and reading every 2 years. It's considered the most accurate barometer for how students across the country are improving, or in this case, regressing. I mean, this is U.S. News and World Report. I don't know if you can see that. Yeah. Right. So this is not like some kind of fringe, thing or something. This is the one that always produces the college reports and ranks colleges and all that stuff. Right. So I just want to make that point because that would be why you might want to listen further, right? Because this is last year. They're sounding the alarm, November of last year, and now look where we're at. Now you have all these kids rather being taken out of the school system. And I have someone who lives in my neighborhood. I was just talking to them, getting to know them a little bit. Actually, I've only talked to them briefly once before at a party, but I was getting to know her a little bit better. Where she was walking around the neighborhood yesterday, in fact, and she's a curriculum coordinator for a very large school district in Texas. And she was telling me that, I was asking her some questions about, what's it like right now with everything going, um, uh, uh, from kids being in the classroom to everything being online. And, I don't want to say too many specifics in terms of the school district or that stuff because, kind of respect her privacy on that particular point. But it's a very large school district in Texas. And she said that this was really interesting. She said prior to this whole school shutting down for the coronavirus thing, they in the school district they thought that probably 80% of their kids would be prepared to do online from home, like if something were to happen or whatever. Like that's because they're looking at these things all the time, obviously. 80% because they had, for example, teachers who were already doing a flipped classroom, which would be the teacher would give videos to watch at home. The kids would watch them at home and come to school and do homework at home and come to class. And then they would discuss that stuff together. So it's like the teacher's not lecturing. They're just letting the kids learn it from the videos. And then when they come to class, they're more doing practice problems and they can ask the teacher questions. You can look it up. It's called a flipped classroom. There's many teachers who are doing this now. So the reason I bring it up is because of that. They thought that the children would be, in a certain sense, prepared, at least to a large degree, to be able to transition to online if it was necessary. But now she says what they're finding out is that it's really only like 40% of the kids in this huge school district. And I asked her, I said, how big is like a typical school? They have a middle school that has 1,200 students. That's like 6 through 8. And then they have another school, which is a high school that has 4,500 kids just at that one school. And she said it was 2 schools that are connected like in the same place. So technically, I guess it's 2 schools, but I mean, still, that's quite large. And that's just one school basically in the whole district, which, I mean, there's got to be dozens, if not 100 schools. I don't know how many are in the district, but quite a few. And you're talking about 40% of the students are not even prepared to do online schooling at home. And I asked her why, and she said because even though they thought they would be because of like these teachers doing the flipped classroom, most kids are keeping up. It was because a lot of those kids were taking their laptops, or if they even had one, they would bring them to school and use the Wi-Fi there. or they would just go to school and use the library computer, whatever the case may be. But they didn't even have Wi-Fi at home. So then the school didn't really understand that until now it's become apparent. Why aren't they able to do it now all of a sudden? It's because they didn't have Wi-Fi at home. So now they're stuck at home with no Wi-Fi. And she said they've have teachers where some of their students, they have to call them on the phone to see, you know, what they understand or don't. That's the level of where they're at right now. So we talked a lot more about a lot of things, and I told her a little bit about obviously what we do with TechnoTutor, and she's very interested now in learning more about that, especially when she got to meet Max and everything and saw where he's at as a 3-year-old. It's kind of mind-blowing to her. So we're going to be obviously continuing that conversation. But I just brought it up so that you could see, even within the school system, they are totally at a loss right now. But she said in a few years, they'll have everything figured out as to, for example, in the school right now, you have teachers who were prepared for this, didn't know this was going to happen. All their students suddenly weren't going to be coming to class, so they're having to make videos to teach their kids. Okay, and this woman that I'm talking about is in my neighborhood. She was saying she has to review many of these videos in some cases to give feedback, and she's having to teach the teachers or explain to them that this video you made isn't complete, meaning it's a pretty good explanation. There's nothing necessarily wrong with what you're saying in this video, but you have to understand the child is only getting the information right here. You can't in real time see if they understand. They can't ask you a question in real time. So the video you're making has to be complete. And that was a really interesting point that she brought up. Clearly she's looking at it from a very, big picture perspective in terms of that. And I thought that was really cool. But my point is they're realizing, the kid, I have to do things in a different way because the child can't necessarily ask me questions. So my videos have to be really good, and they have to explain everything, whether the child is confused or not. And so they're going to have to become more specific. And the point of that, why I'm saying that, is because once they figure out, okay, here's the video that is complete, the teacher doesn't need to make that video again. All that has to happen is it needs to be administered. So do you really need 5 teachers teaching a subject, or do you just need 1 or 2, and then they're just working with the kids all day in terms of answering questions? So I think this is going to have a big effect from that perspective. I'm just going to pause for a moment. Okay, I'm just checking to see my live stream and everything, make sure people can hear me. It looks like they can. I see David's giving me some feedback, so I appreciate that. Okay, cool. All right, so I just wanted to share all of that because the school system is not going to figure it out quickly. But then, going back to the point why I brought it up really, though, is because she made this point that within a couple of years, everything will be in lockstep, meaning they'll have it figured out to the point where they've got all the videos figured out. So that's how they're looking at it. It's not just like I'm theorizing like, they're going to figure out the videos and they won't need teachers anymore. But think about the logical conclusion of that. Once they have the videos that they know get the children to the standard they want them to, they don't need the teacher to do that anymore. So what does a teacher's role become then? And do they need as many teachers, for example? And for anybody who's thinking, well, but that's actually good because they'll figure out the videos that teach everybody and all that stuff. They couldn't figure it out when they were in the classroom with real-time feedback. So what's the likelihood they're going to figure it out now? In other words, is it really possible to create a video that just 100% educates every child to the fullest possible amount? Like 100%? No. But even look at the school system itself. It was never trying to do that in the first place. How many children come away from high school having mastered mathematics up to that level that they were taught? Very few. The standards have been getting lower and lower and lower. And I remember there was a teacher I was talking to a while back, and they made this point. They'd been teaching for like 30 or 40 years or something. And they said the kids that they were getting the kids that were getting C's 20 years ago are the kids that are getting A's now. Meaning when they're looking at the children in their classrooms and they're looking at, okay, this is the level at which my A students are at, like their understanding, their communication ability, their writing ability, their reading ability, all that stuff. That level of ability is like what my C students were doing 20 years ago. So the teachers themselves, especially the ones that have been around a while and are really honest about the point, they see everything declining, right? And I wasn't prepared to go into like the SAT and all that stuff, but maybe I'll do that in another video. But they're removing things from the SAT to sort of cover up the fact that children's abilities are going down. So in direct proportion to this point right here, and maybe well, no, I'm not going to go into that right now, but let me I'll give it this point briefly on that. The number one key indicator for a child's success in school is their reading ability, and the number one key indicator of that, which can predict their later reading ability, is their vocabulary, and even their vocabulary at age 4. Vocabulary also predicts a person's income, IQ. It's like everything. They can even predict the SAT score, or they could, except for now, it still does actually track very well, but they've attempted to remove the parts of the SAT that people would struggle with. Okay, so even though your vocabulary would predict how well you would do on the SAT, they have removed a lot of the vocabulary from the SAT so that, yes, it still predicts it, meaning the higher a child's vocabulary, the better they'll do on the SAT still today, because it represents your ability to process information and see patterns and solve problems and react to unpredictable information and so forth. But the students for example, I was a National Merit finalist. There's only, out of every million students every year that take the SAT or the PSAT, which is like the one right before the SAT that you take as a junior in high school, only 15,000 students out of those 1 million become National Merit finalists. So I was one of those finalists. It has to do with how well you do on the PSAT. And I got lots of scholarships and so forth from that. Now you can see it's a very small percentage of people that do that. In fact, let's see, it's about 1%, isn't it? Because out of 1 million, 10% would be 100,000. So 10,000, right? That'd be a percentage, right? No, is that right? No, it's 0.1%, right? Well, my point is a very small percentage, right? Um, uh, the number of students right now who could easily do what I did, I don't even know what that would be. It would be an extremely small percentage. So, for example, if you take out of 1 million people, okay, so if you just do the math, you have this very small percentage, even back then, who would have achieved what I achieved. And it wasn't based on your number of correct answers per se, it was a scaled score, right? So in other words, it was based on how everyone else does, okay? So if you look at how a scaled score works, it's like there's like an average, and then the further you get away, the smaller the percentage becomes, certain percentiles of people who are falling into that. So to be a National Merit Scholar back then, you'd have to be in the top 15,000, as I said, right? So think about what percentage of the people back then could do that. And now what they've done is they've taken with the SAT, they've taken all the vocabulary out where you have to know words without any context. So for example, when I took the SAT and the PSAT, there were sections on there where you have analogies. It's like this word means this, as this word means blank, and there'd be 5 or 4 choices of words, and you have to know which one goes in there. But there's no clues as to what any of those words could possibly mean. Versus what they do now is they have a reading passage, and then they say, in the passage, this word most likely means or most nearly means this. And so you can go back and kind of try to figure out what it means. But in the SAT that I took, they had entire sections of the test where you just had to know the meanings of words. And so I did very well. I took Latin in high school, so I could figure out words I didn't know. And there's a whole bunch of other factors that go into that. But my point is, if you look at how such a small percentage of people even then got into that point of being a National Merit Scholar, where do you think things are at now? Why are they removing the SAT points from all of this? Or I'm sorry, the vocabulary points from the SAT. Why? Because it's covering up exactly what I'm showing you right here, which is the fact that children are not reading at the same levels, which means they're not developing an effective vocabulary. Okay, so enough about that. I'm not trying to make a whole thing just about that point. I've made many videos about this point, and you could go check out some of those later, and I'll probably show some more things you can go look at. But hopefully that's clear that children right now in school are reading at the lowest levels since the 90s. Okay, so now we have the schools in crisis mode. That all the kids are going home, so they're both mostly just watching videos at home, which they could have been doing anyways. And what's going to happen the next time there's a pandemic? And isn't it obvious to you, like the way people are reacting to this current pandemic? People are very much okay with things being shut down. I mean, I know some people aren't, but I think many people are in terms of the majority, are sort of like, well, if we can eliminate things that are unnecessary for us to go out or things we can't predict, then why not? Right? And so that means restaurants are going to be more delivery based. Stores are going to be more delivery based, or you just go in and everything's automated so you don't have to deal with as many people. So there's less likely a spread of disease, perhaps. Um, Schools are going to be more online, and kids are going to be at home more, and people's jobs are going to be transitioning more and more to just being at home. And this is something with technology that we've been saying since we started the company in 2013, explaining this to people that, automation, artificial intelligence, all of these points are occurring, which means that you're not going to have as many jobs available, for one, but two, the jobs that are going to be available, it's going to be hyper competitive, or you're going to have a very high level of education, because there are people behind the machines and behind the artificial intelligence and so forth, but the level of education required to deal with that type of stuff is totally different than, and I don't mean this in an offensive way, but it's totally different than driving a truck. Now, you do have to have a certain level of knowledge and education to drive a truck. I could not right now drive a big rig truck across the country. It's not my skill set. But if they can develop a truck that drives itself, they don't need a person with that. Now they need a person who understands the algorithms and so forth to troubleshoot things when they go wrong. So there will be jobs at some level. There's going to be a lot less. They're going to be more competitive and require a higher level of education. Is the education system preparing your children for that? And just before I go further, this is an interview I did with actually a TechnoTutor client, which is pretty cool, named David. And I just want to point it out. You can find it on my Facebook, and I'll put a link to this below this video when it goes on YouTube as well. But I'll put a link also into the Facebook Live as well. But we talked about the modern education system, the roots of it, where it comes from, the purpose of it, why it's a problem right now, and why it's not supporting our kids to transition, especially right now, but also in the future with automation and AI and so forth. So I've gone into that in a lot of detail in other places. So I'm just kind of giving you some highlights right now. But I just want to make sure the problem was obviously clear. Now, the one thing also I wanted to point out too is that they didn't look. They're not testing homeschoolers. Okay, this is students in school. That's the problem. So what's going on? I looked up this before I started. This is the National Home Education Research Institute, and they have some fast facts. So I just thought I'd go through some of these and take a look at them. Let's see here. There are 2.5 million homeschool students in grades K through 12 in the United States. Okay, so there's quite a few. Let's see here. It's continuing to grow at 2 to 8% per year. Wow. So if it's 7%, that means within 10 years it'll double. So of course, if it's lower, it'll take longer, but we'll see. I think it's going to grow a lot faster now. Homeschooling, let's see. Okay, it's been around for a long time. This is interesting. One study shows that 32% of homeschool students are Black, Asian, Hispanic, and others, so non-white. 32%. Which is, I would think, pretty close to just the typical demographics of the U.S. I don't know exactly, but it seems like that'd be pretty close. Let's see here. Oh, check this out. Taxpayers spend an average of $11,732 per student in public schools. Homeschools spend an average of $600 per student per year. And yeah, look at that. Right? So as taxpayers, we're spending a lot of money to put kids in school for this. Okay. Let's see here. Okay. Reasons and motivations for home educating. Uh, Common reasons. People want to customize or individualize their curriculum and create a learning environment and their learning environment for their child. They accomplish more academically in schools because you don't have to wait at the pace of the class. Use pedagogical approaches other than those typical in schools. So in other words, you don't necessarily have to have a teacher in front of 20 kids lecturing them. You can try other methods. Enhance family relationships between children and parents and among siblings. Definitely. Provide guided and reasoned social interactions with youthful peers and adults. Provide safe environment. You don't have bullying. You don't have other peer influence. You don't have racism. That's interesting. Now, keep that in mind. I mean, clearly you're not going to have a teacher who's racist being able to, hold the black kids back or hold the white kids back or whatever. You're not going to have any of that kind of crap. You're not going to have this unhealthy sexuality associated with it. I mean, there's a lot of problems if you just think about being in that environment. And I'll tell you this person I was talking to, she said at the elementary school that she worked with, she said this particular, there's a lot of human trafficking in the U.S. And I was like, what do you mean by human trafficking? She said, for example, because when I hear that word, I would think of, it's like some big operation of, like moving people across the border or something. I'm going to go back to just me talking. Like it'd be some big operation of people, moving across the border or something like that, or like a brothel or, something like that. But she was saying just stuff like a family member, a parent or an uncle or a brother or, a sister pimping out their younger sibling. And I was like, whoa, I wouldn't even have thought of that as like human trafficking. And she said that there was this elementary school that was within her realm. This was years ago, that they would have to clean up condoms from behind the elementary school, like on a regular basis. They were cleaning up lots of condoms. And I was just like, oh, fuck. So there's a lot of shit going on in schools. And it's funny. And I don't mean to say funny in the sense of it's actually funny. I mean, in the sense of it's a bit ironic because as we go through some of these articles I have, the arguments they're trying to make as to why homeschooling shouldn't be allowed to a certain degree is because, there's all this sexual abuse in the homes and all this stuff. And so, but that's happening in schools, right? There's a lot more going on in a school than just education. It's not like you send your kids to school and they're safe. Plus there's like the school shootings and all this other stuff as well. So there's a lot more than just what they're telling you. So I just wanted to make that point real quick. So going back here, alternative education approach when schools are closed due to acute health situations. So they've updated this obviously to talk about this whole coronavirus thing. Obviously, parents also want to have direction over what values are being taught, and nowadays you go to the schools and it's all one very specific political ideology, cultural ideology, and so forth, right? And there's a lot of discussion of like, transgenderism, sexuality, gay, lesbian, trans, there's talks about racism. It's like most teachers they've looked at are, more Democrat or progressive leaning, or the ones that are afraid to talk about it due to fears of ostracization and so forth, right? So there's particular worldviews. It's not particularly friendly to Christians, for example. So if you value those things and you don't want your child influenced at a young age by other people outside of your values and belief systems, then sending them to school kind of is counterproductive to that. So that's why some people choose to homeschool, or one reason anyways. But this is really what I wanted to get into here. It says that home educated typically score 15 to 30 percentile points above school students and on standardized academic achievement tests. The public school average is 50th percentile. Okay, that's just obvious stuff. A 2015 study found black homeschool students to be scoring 23 to 42 percentile points above black public school students. Homeschool students score above average on achievement tests regardless of their parents' level of formal education or their family's household income. Whether homeschool parents were ever certified teachers or not is not related to their children's academic achievement. This is something I hope people take away. Now, I am obviously suggesting that people have TechnoTutor primarily for if they're going to be doing homeschooling, because it's going to take this to a whole nother level. And I think I'll get into that a little bit later, maybe in this video, but I have lots of videos talking about that as to why that would be the case. And in that interview that I showed you, this one here that I did on surviving the system, we go into that a little bit as well. But you don't have to be a certified teacher to educate your child at home or for them to do well in schoolwork. The problem, though, is if the state says you have to be teacher certified to teach a child, well, then you have a problem. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. And it says the degree of state control and regulation of homeschooling is not related to academic achievement, so it doesn't really matter whether the state's regulated or not. Homeschool students typically score above average on the SAT and ACT. Homeschool students are increasingly being recruited, actively recruited by colleges. So there's a lot of points here. I didn't pull this up to go into necessarily all of these points, but I wanted to point out a little bit of these points. So in other words, if you're just looking at this as, okay, well, it seems to be that there's some advantages to homeschoolers. So let's, maybe you wouldn't say it's for everybody, but you would at least say they're definitely showing some differences and advantages here. Why would homeschooling be a bad thing? Well, this was something that I saw recently, and it's really why I decided to make this video. Homeschooling Summit. So this is scheduled for June 18th through 19th, 2020. It's being put on by Harvard Law School Child Advocacy Program. And it says, the description, we will convene leaders in education and child welfare policy, legislators and legislative staff, academics, and policy advocates to discuss child's rights in connection with homeschooling in the United States. The focus will be on problems of educational deprivation and child maltreatment that too often occur under the guise of homeschooling in a legal environment of minimal or no oversight. Experts will lead conversations about the available empirical evidence, the current regulatory environment, and so forth. Okay. It's private by invitation only. Got a whole list of people they've got in here. And you can probably look through some of these. And it's being done under the guise of we have to protect these children who are being abused in their homes, and we can't allow homeschoolers just run amok, basically. Now, I went to, where's the agenda? Here it is, the agenda. So I went ahead and downloaded that, and then I have it right here. Oops. I have it right here, and let me just pull it up real quick on this program. Okay, so I think you should be able to see that now. And I was taking a look through this. So here's Thursday evening, Friday. So they talk about the history, current state of homeschooling, evolution of parent rights, and so forth. Here's 8:30 a.m. Concerns with homeschooling. The overall picture, including educational and social outcomes. That's a concern? Civil and democratic values? That's a concern? Child maltreatment? Okay, I understand that. Notice, where is the part where it says, hey, homeschoolers are getting something right. We need to consider that. What is that? This is all obviously very anti-homeschooling. Reform proposals, regulatory oversight, a presumptive ban. That's one of the talks they're going to do. Political action, the current politics, HSLDA dominance and tactics, legislative and other advocacy strategies for reform. Notice this. Where's the discussion on, hey, state constitutions as a basis for requiring homeschooling reform? Why are they trying to reform homeschooling? In other words, why aren't they looking at where is homeschooling getting things right? And why right now? Why is it that this is being discussed right now in this current context? Okay, let me switch back for a moment. Really, I want everyone who's watching to consider this point. Why is this point being discussed right now at Harvard Law School? Because there's a lot of people's kids right now who are not physically in school right now. So parents are seeing this opportunity of, maybe I should just keep schooling them at home because I'm having to help them with their homework, and I'm seeing what they're learning in school, and this doesn't seem right to me anymore. Now, is it everybody? No, of course not. Many parents are like, God, I can't wait for the kids to go back to school. I understand that that's the case for many parents. But there's going to be a lot more discussion right now of, hey, and I see it online. There's all these textbook companies and curriculum companies like targeting parents, so they can say, now if those companies can get their curriculums into the hands of parents, why would they want them to go back to school? So it's only going to be more targeting from that perspective. And if the parents are realizing that there's problems with the kids' education in school, then they're going to be more open to that. And what happens when there's another pandemic, or there's another issue, or there's another school shooting? It's just going to be like there's going to be a final straw where a lot of parents are like, okay, I need to take matters into my own hands. I need to start educating my kid at home. Plus, we're working from home more now. We can probably do it. We don't have to pay for daycare after school. We just have the tutor come over, or whatever the case may be. It's not going to be for everybody, but there's going to be a growing movement. I'm telling you right now, there's going to be a growing movement. So what I see is happening right now with this particular thing I'm showing you with the Harvard homeschooling is that it's going to be a push right now to destroy the budding homeschool movement and make sure that it doesn't grow out of control. That's what they're looking at right now. They're getting all these top legal minds together to figure out how they can create more educational reform within homeschooling, which is like, remember what I just showed you with the national reading emergency? They're not talking about that. They're not saying, you see what I'm saying? They're like, how can we have more regulation? How can we impose more rules? But what are they going to be imposing? The standards of the school system, which is clearly not getting it right by any means whatsoever, saying it's a national crisis. So what business does anyone have coming into the homes of parents and saying, we are here to tell you what to do? And like I said before, there's all kinds of sexual abuse and all kinds of crazy shit going on in schools right now. That to act like there's all this abuse that happens in the homes, and therefore we need to regulate that more or get kids in school, that's not going to solve the problem. If there is a problem, which I'd like to see the statistics of what is actually going on in the homeschool families compared to any other family in the U.S. where the kids are in school, and what is the difference. Because that's what they want to talk about, but that's just like this sort of, I don't even know what the word is. It's like, it's a misdirection, because they're not talking about the fact that the homeschool kids are doing better in school or in their academics, even though they're not in school. They're doing better in college recruiting. They're doing better in their SAT scores and so forth, right? And so I see that there's right now this push happening, and it's probably going to get even bigger to try and shut down homeschooling. And they're going to be using all kinds of arguments. And, there's a lot of families, for example, who are not, into like doing vaccines and stuff right now. And so, you could be on either side of that argument, but you would have to agree that a parent should have the ability to choose what's happening with their child at a certain level, right? And so my point only is that there are parents who care about that kind of a thing, and they're going to be seeing, hey, I have to now get my child vaccinated because of the coronavirus in order for them to go to school. I don't want that, and so I'm going to pull them out of school. So this is like what you're seeing with this Harvard thing is like the preemptive point of, hey, let's make sure that this homeschooling thing is not seen as an option. How can we regulate it more? How can we start to cause, more or get more control over this whole thing? So let me get back to my other scene here. Okay, so we've got that point. Now I noticed that they mentioned, where'd it go? In the agenda. Oh, in the agenda was this HSLDA. So I looked that up just to show everybody what that is. And it's these two attorneys, they're homeschooling dads, who created this Homeschool Legal Defense Association. Right? So you can go and read about it, hslda.com, but they had an opinion about this, obviously, because they're mentioned in that agenda, right? Just taking a look at that. I'm going to go to their little article that they wrote about it. And here they are. It says, the Homeschooling Summit, Problems, Politics, and Prospects for Reform is being billed as a means of bringing together leaders in education and child welfare policy to discuss child's rights and homeschooling. Dr. Rachel Coleman, one of them, Coalition for Responsible Home Education and co-founder of Homeschooling's Invisible Children. She is expected to reiterate her organization's views that homeschooling must be more firmly regulated by the government. Proposed regulations include a call for annual evaluation of every homeschooled student. Well, what is this evaluation? Right? See, so the cool thing is you can link to that and look at everything, right? They've got a whole lot of stuff going on here. The parent providing primary instruction should have at least a high school diploma or GED. Parents should be required to provide instructions in the same subjects as public schools. Why? They should be required to maintain academic records for the child they homeschool. Look, they should be required to submit copies of birth certificate, immunization records, annual assessments to be kept on file. Their academic progress should be evaluated and reported annually. Look at all of this, how they want to go into the parents' homes and start keeping track of all the kids' progress and so forth, when I've already shown you the school system is already failing at that. So, and I know somebody can look at it and be like, so what are you saying that, children shouldn't be, assessed and like you should just let parents do whatever they want, their kids should be stupid and all this stuff? That's not what I'm saying. But do you see the problem with having the school systems? Basically, it's the school system because that's the standards that they're using. Do you want the school system going in and saying, now we have to impose the standards, we have to give the tests and all this stuff, and what are the parents going to have to do? Teach to that and spend their time teaching to that. Samantha Field, author of Meet HL's SLDA, the most powerful religious right lobby you've never heard of. So you can see the bias there. Let's see here. Research on homeschooled students' academic performance has been hampered by the lack of data collected on homeschool students in most cases. Okay, well, we already seen the research in the schools and what that's doing, right? So I just wanted to share with you a little bit about this point because you can see here's a group that is trying to support homeschool families, and they're directly being attacked by this homeschooling summit. And then you can see what they're pointing out is all the people who are in the summit who are very openly against this group or their purposes and so forth, right? So just some points to look at. We already looked at that one. Now, here's an article I found. I think Rebecca shared this. Harvard Law School calls for ban on homeschooling. Homeschooled Harvard graduate on why this is wrong. So here's a Harvard graduate. I'm just going to read through some of this. I graduated from Harvard with honors. In fact, Harvard was the very first school I ever set foot in. Look at that. The first 12 years of my education, I was homeschooled from kindergarten to grade 12 or 12th grade. I was proud of my school until last night when I read Harvard Magazine's article on the so-called risks of homeschooling. We'll have to look at that too. In essence, this article is not an attack on a form of education some might view as lesser quality. In essence, this article is an attack on the fundamental rights and freedoms that make our country, and until recently institutions such as Harvard, what they are. Let's pause that for a second. Let's go take a look at this. The risks of homeschooling. We have essentially an unregulated regime in the area of homeschooling. All 50 states have laws that make education compulsory, and state constitutions ensure a right to education. But if you look at the legal regime governing homeschooling, there are very few requirements that parents do anything. Even a parent requirement such as submitting curricula or providing evidence that teaching and learning are taking place, she says, aren't necessarily enforced. About a dozen states have rules about the level of education needed by parents who homeschool, she adds. But look, they have rules about that. They have rules already about what level of education and understanding and so forth you have to have for teachers. But look at the reality of classrooms and results of the school system in America. And Harry started off with that article to show you that point. So if the government says these are the standards that a person must have to be qualified to teach kids, and then you see those results, why would it be a good thing for them to now start regulating the parent in terms of what they should know or do or not do? And I see a very dangerous game being played here if people allow this, right? And I'm not suggesting that anybody break the law, but it's not at the point yet where homeschooling is illegal in the US. But that is what is being called for in this Harvard Homeschool Summit, as you saw. So parents are going to have to say no now before it gets to that point, because once it's at that point, it's a lot harder. And then you have, for example, the legal defense groups for the homeschoolers are the ones being demonized by these groups. Why do you think that is? Because they know that's the point you have to turn to once the laws are changed. You have to go the legal route. So their best bet is shut down all the legal groups first, right? So you see, it's very sinister point here. So let's go back. See, they're always talking about child abuse, right? And I get that. I understand that. But this is the problem. It's speculation. Where's the actual facts? Where's the actual, okay, this percentage of homeschool students physically or sexually abuse their kids? And how does that... See, here we go. She argues one benefit of sending children to school at age 4 or 5 is that teachers are mandated reporters required to alert authorities of evidence of child abuse or neglect. What if the teacher is the abuser? What if the teacher's neglecting? I mean, you can go on YouTube right now and look up tons of videos of kids being slapped around and yelled at and hit by their teachers. So there's this sort of, we're doing it to protect the kids. Children should grow up exposed to democratic values, ideas about non-discrimination, and tolerance of other people's viewpoints. But look, surveys of homeschoolers show that a majority of such families are driven by conservative Christian beliefs and seek to remove their children from mainstream culture. Bartholet notes that some parents are extreme religious ideologues who question science and promote female subservience and white supremacy. Okay, some, sure. I really doubt that's the majority, okay? But even if you just held to this point, okay, I'm not arguing for the female subservience and white supremacy, okay? Or questioning science. But they're saying you should not discriminate and you should be tolerant of other people's viewpoints. So they're saying these people are they're not being tolerant of other viewpoints, okay? Now, I don't agree with necessarily with tolerance of viewpoints. I think the viewpoint that person should have should be the best viewpoint based on rationality and common sense. The problem is common sense is not common. Okay, so I'm not arguing that white supremacists should, that their viewpoint is valid. But I don't agree that you should force people to change their viewpoint. I think that you should support them to be able to understand why a different viewpoint is valid. And the only way to do that, by the way, is education. But not in the way the school does it. Because what the school is doing is not education. It's actually indoctrination. It's actually forcing viewpoints on somebody. Because the one thing the school doesn't do is it doesn't improve a child's information processing ability. In fact, in many ways, it exploits it. And in many ways, it filters people based on that and then puts you into different positions in society based on that. I talked about that in that podcast that I showed you, in many other videos. Maybe here's a good point where I can kind of promote some of my other videos. If you go to my YouTube channel, right, it's, well, that's not going to help you. That was my email. Where is it? Well, I'll just tell you what it is. It's Cameron V. Cope. So here's my name, Cameron Cope. But let's see if this helps. You would have to go to user. There it is, right there. You'd have to go to Cameron V. Cope, right? That's my YouTube channel. But if you go to this playlist, so I'm going to go back real quick, because I just want to show you these playlists, these videos in here. If you go to the discussions about reality playlist, I would highly suggest you listen to this video, this video, this video, this video, this video, this video. No, all the videos. No, I'm kidding. These four in particular, okay, because I really lay out, along with this podcast, Surviving the System. You could look it up on Spreaker.com. Okay, and I know also Surviving the System podcast is on like all the major podcast networks. That's what David told me. So like, Apple, iTunes, I guess. I don't know what they all are, but all those major ones, right? But you can also look it up on Spreaker. You can go to survivingthesystem.com, or no, sorry, .org right here. It's on there as well. If you want to listen to this one. But that one combined with these 4 videos in particular are going to really show you my perspective on not just TechnoTutor, but the education system, schooling, real education, why vocabulary is the most important thing, and why it is that increasing your information processing ability is the most important aspect of your education. It's how you become educated. It's not you become educated by learning books. You become educated by having an ability and developing an ability to process information, because that's how you get information from the books and videos and speakers and seminars and all that stuff, is by being able to process a lot of information clearly and effectively. And that's the one thing the school doesn't focus on, because they can't. And I go into that in all these videos, right? So explain why, especially starting here. I might start here if I were you. And then from there, I would go to, probably go to, just do it in order like this, right? Starting from here, because I go into exactly all those points. But why kids can't read and why this matters, I'd really highly recommend that you, if anything else, listen to that one, because it goes into how we teach children to read, phonics versus whole language, the 2 main approaches, and why they're total shit, basically. And I go into a little bit why TechnoTutor is the key in that point. But even beyond that, I want to show you a couple things real quick here. Let's see what I got. Let me change my scene here. Switch. Oh no, I'm already on that scene. This will work. Okay. Just still learning the OBS system here for streaming. Just want to show you a couple things real quick. So you could just go watch these videos, but I just want to give a little commentary on some of these.
What about this? What about this?
Can't see that one because it was like in a very low color font. But I'm gonna skip to the end here. See, look, she changes the words. It's not just colors. You may not be able to hear them on this live stream because like the volume's kind of low on this video. She's writing the word police car, right? And then
you know that one?
Now you can't see it probably on the video, at least on my side, but she writes the word diminished. I think it's just because like it uploaded in the standard definition or something. But she writes the word diminished, and he can see it on the high definition version of the video. You can see it, but she writes the word diminished, and he says diminished. So he reads all those words, and in the beginning, with the colors, let me go back. In the beginning, when she's writing the names of the colors, she's putting them deliberately in the font color that's different than the word itself. So when it says green, it's like actually blue, or when it says yellow, it's actually a red color. So on purpose to show like he's just reading the word. It's no problem. He's not getting any clues from the color, but he can also, that test they have online where you try to say the color name versus the color of the thing and vice versa and everything. So he's able to do that very easily. His information processing ability is extremely advanced for a 3.5-year-old. It's like to say he's at a certain grade level, it totally misses the point. But his reading is about, first to second grade, really, because of what second grader do you know can read the word diminished? And why does he know that word? Because we've been teaching him music theory, so he can read augmented and diminished and major and minor and scale and tone and pitch and volume, as you saw, and things like that, right? He has synthesizers that he plays with, and so he knows all the vocabulary. He can read those words. So he's able to learn very quickly those things. Like he knows how to play chords on the piano. He can read chord charts and show you an augmented seventh chord, and whatever, all these different things. Let me go back to this, show you a couple more, just to give you some context. This one's really cool. What?
Mathematics.
Mathematics? Well, mathematics is a way of thinking about things logically.
Do it.
Do it? Do some mathematics? You do some basic math? Okay, look here. I'll write it down. Okay, what does that say?
1 plus equals
What does it say?
2.
Hold on, read it carefully.
1
Left to right.
plus 2 equals
What does that equal?
1, 2, 3.
What does 1 plus 2 equal?
3.
Okay, so you might think, oh, that's just something he memorized. Fine, okay. Okay, let me do another one. So I'm literally just randomly writing them. I didn't show this to him beforehand.
What does that say?
What is 2 plus 2 equal?
What does it equal?
What?
Do you remember how we figured it out? Can you do 2 fingers on one hand? Do 2 fingers. Okay, now do 2 fingers on your other hand.
4.
Oh, good job. Do you want to do one more? Let's do, this is one we haven't done before. 2, what does that say? What does that say?
5.
Oh. All right. So I just wanted to show you that little thing. Hopefully you could hear it. If not, you can go check out that playlist. Just go to my channel, Cameron V. Cope. That's my YouTube username. And then look under the TechnoTutor Co-Founders Kids playlist, and you'll find that in there. But I wanted to show you that, like, in that video, so we don't have him sitting down, like, drilling math facts and stuff like that. By the time he was, I'm just looking at my playlist because I have it in here. By the time he was 22 months, he could recognize all of the numbers from 0, 1, all the way up to 20. He could say 1, 1 together, and he knows that's 11. He doesn't say it's 1, 1. He knows it's 11. And he could recognize what a plus symbol was, equals. And when I say recognize, I mean like immediately, unconsciously, not thinking about it, not like, plus? No, like he knows it, okay? Just like your name. If I say, what's your name? You're like, Cameron, or whatever your name is, right? You know it. Like, you don't have to, it's, what the school system does is the way, it's not so much that it's the way that school is teaching kids that's doing this. It's just the school system is designed so that this is the way you're expected to know the information. In other words, they're not testing it whether you know it like you really know it. They're just testing whether you can remember it for a period of time. So going 2 plus 2 is 4. As long as it's the right answer, then you get the A. It's not about whether you know it. It's about whether you can get it right. And there's a total difference between those things. So if you take this back fundamentally, the most basic aspect of language is the letters and the numbers, the symbols of the language, punctuation, plus, minus, all those things, the symbols. Because you put those symbols together, those letters, let's just call letters and numbers, those become the words. Then the words become the sentences become ideas, paragraphs, etc. So the way in which you start with teaching the child the symbols, if those are integrated within them physically at an unconscious competence level, then they'll be able to process words very easily. So that's why Max is able to read those words. He's not sounding them out. It's like those words are integrated into his memory unconsciously. And when I say unconsciously, it doesn't mean it was done in an unconscious way. It was done in a way using our TechnoTutor technology where he's conscious of what's happening, but he's learning it to the level where he no longer has to think about it. It's just in there, which is where most of the information is. But when it's not done in a way that supports you to access that unconscious memory easily, or when you learned it, there was all kinds of extra things involved with how you learned it, it's kind of like corrupting that file. And so when you try to recall it, either it's very slow or there's extra associations. Like if I say the word ice cream and you're like, oh, because you had this memory as a kid where a dog like licked your ice cream and then like took it and bit you or something, you're associating that memory with that word. It's like, imagine all the words you might have associations with, or even all the letters, just because of the environment you in when you learned them. It can cause a lot of problems within your ability to process information, and that accumulates. It becomes this massive thing. It's like a brick wall that you build brick by brick. Eventually, you're sitting on top of this brick wall, and none of those bricks are solid, and you're just like, whoa, 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 and it's about to collapse. So that's what you see in school with many children, is they get to this point where it's like their brick wall can't handle any more pressure. Okay, and so they eventually collapse. I hope my audio is not clipping too much. It looks like it was a little bit, but I apologize if so. So I just wanted to show you a couple of things there, because, you know, and that's just my son. I also have a daughter, Seneca. Oh, let me go back to my playlist, switch, transition over. Let's see. I'll try this one. Listen.
Oh.
Yeah. How about?
C.
Wow. How about?
Day.
Yeah. So I'm just showing you there. Hopefully you can hear it. But again, you can go watch all these videos. It's much more easy if you put your headphones in or something like that later. This is not me teaching her something in these videos. This is just me just demonstrating for the camera, hey, look what she knows. We use TechnoTutor to integrate and teach all of these things. And we use TechnoTutor for about 15 minutes per child a day. And my daughter is 18 months. She's a little slightly over 18 months this month. Max is 3.5 years old. Both of their birthdays are in October. Okay, so Seneca will be 2 at the beginning of October. Max will be 4 at the end of October. Just so you can see where they're at age-wise. Okay, this is not normal. Where their abilities. It's because of TechnoTutor. And I know many people watching, or some anyways, might be like, well, I don't know, you're not proving anything. You're not showing how TechnoTutor works. I know that. If you want to know what it is and how it works, just reach out and we'll show you how it works. Okay, but I'm not going to show it to you on here. It doesn't work like that. I can't do that. Okay, so there's a reason for that. My goal is just for you to see, like, oh damn, these people know what they're talking about, right? They understand. I mean, we've done all the research. You can see in my playlist, or not this one in particular, but those ones I was showing you earlier. I have a playlist also on. Let me go back here. Let me get back to my playlists here. I also have discussions on education. That's another playlist that I have. And there's a lot of videos of my wife, Katie, right, talking about the kids, education, and so forth. Also, I put some of my other videos in there as well. Any of these things you see with this green matrix background, that's me talking, just no video. You know, these ones with this blue one, that's my wife talking, no video, just because, you know, maybe it was just an audio recording. So we have a lot of stuff in here. Here's my friend Drake. He's also a TechnoTutor distributor in Florida, right, talking about why black kids can't read. Just showing you, there's a lot of videos in here. There's also this playlist as well, discussions about reality, which I have some of those education ones. But then I go into other topics beyond just education and so forth, per se, like kids' education and so forth. All right, so I just wanted to show you some of that. But going back to the kids, let me show you another really cool one. Here's Seneca.
Can you show us an F?
This is 16 months.
There you go. Where's the C? Where is C? That's right. Where is G? Where is G? Do you see a G anywhere? Where's G, Cindy? Yeah, that's right. Do you see A? Where is A? That's right. A.
Now, the reason why she's able to do that, it maybe doesn't show up totally clearly in the video, but we had labeled all of the piano keys with letters, like stickers. We actually done it for Max, but because Seneca was able to recognize many of the letters at that point, at 16 months, then Katie just said, well, let's see if she can recognize them and play the notes based on that. And we did the same thing for Max, so he was able to learn them. Now we've taken all the stickers off. Actually, Max took them off, and now he can tell you any key what it is immediately. He knows them. And now he started to learn different songs on the piano and so forth. So he's still very much in that learning process with the piano. But I just wanted to show you that point as well. So it goes beyond just, what we're doing is not just school academics, but we incorporate a lot of that. Like, for example, right now we have a garden at home, and Katie and the kids work on that pretty much every day. And, there was a certain point when actually we had some bamboo and it was all turning yellow, and they had to figure out like that it was, deficient in iron or something. I forget exactly what the issue was, but they learned about chemical composition, and she was explaining to Max. So he can talk to you about nitrogen content in the soil and the fact that the plants need iron rather, and that's why their leaves might turn yellow in some cases. And he helps with the garden. In fact, he took some of the sprouts from our watermelon plants and put them into pots, and then they sprouted even more, and then he took them or they grew even more rather, and then him and Katie were outside and with Seneca giving them out to neighbors. Instead of having like a lemonade stand, he was giving out free watermelon plants that he was growing, right? And he asked just the other day to have his own carrot garden separate from the family garden that we have over in the backyard and so forth. So what we're doing with them is going way beyond what you would get in school. This morning, I'm glad I remember this. We always sleep with our kids, right? So they're still very small. Now Max almost every night asks me to tell him the story of when I had my own bed as a kid. He likes that story. He wants to know, like, what is it like to have your own bed? And we tell him, like, whenever you're ready to sleep in your own room and have your own bed, you will do that. And he's like, well, I want to sleep with you guys for now. I'm like, fine. So I sleep with him every night. For now, Katie sleeps with Seneca. And when they go to sleep, then we can be down together downstairs and so forth, because we do get to spend time together. We don't immediately go to sleep necessarily when the kids go to sleep. But the reason I bring it up is because we're always with them when they go to sleep. We're with them when they wake up. And if they wake up at night and they're crying, I go in there and I help Max, or Katie goes and helps Seneca to go back to sleep and so forth. So they never have that point of someone doesn't care about me, which I experienced a lot as a kid. But the point is, we were laying in bed this morning. He woke up, and I was there with him. And he said, hey, Dad, I'm trying to remember what it was. He said, he was asking me something about flowers. And I said, what kind of flower do you want to plant, or something like that? And he said, Sesonias. And I was like, Sesonias? What kind of, just teasing him a little, just like joking around. I was like, what kind of flower is that? What's a Sesonia? Is that like a begonia? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, okay, I get it. And he goes, I want a saucillation. And I was like, saucillation? I'm like, I have no idea what flower that would be. I was like, I don't know what flower that would be, Max. What flower is that? He's like, it's not a flower. I was like, oh, what is it? He says, it's oscillation. I'm just saying it differently. I'm saying oscillation. And so we started talking about oscillation. Like, he can read that word, and he's learning about it because something to do with what Katie's teaching him. I'm not exactly sure what it is right now, but he has a digital and an analog synthesizer that I have downstairs for both of them. And so oscillation and frequency and vibration is part of obviously that. And they have oscillators and filters and so forth on the synthesizer. So I think it has something to do with that. So we had a conversation this morning about oscillation, and I said oscillation means when something goes back and forth, either physically or metaphorically. And I said, the rate at which it oscillates is called the frequency. And we just started having that conversation. He's listening to me and asking me questions, and he's 3.5 years old. This is the kind of stuff we talk about. When we explain things to him, we explain to as much detail as possible. Even if he doesn't understand a word, then we can go and build that word in TechnoTutor into his vocabulary, and then we can define it, and we can go from there. But we don't just go, oh, you're too young to understand. I might say, Max, at the moment, you don't have enough context to fully understand what I'm explaining, but let me see what I can explain and what'll make sense or not. Right? So we always have those kind of conversations. So this really brings me to the real main point, because I already touched on all the points so far of like, look, homeschoolers, they're coming for you, okay? The system doesn't want you to educate your kids at home. It's obvious why. Watch my podcast that I did with David on surviving the system. It's because the school system was designed to brainwash you, to make you a worker and a slave. That's the bottom line. So, does every person who homeschools their kid necessarily understand everything? Are they necessarily educated? Are they, in many cases, just trying to recreate school at home? Of course. I'm not advocating for homeschooling per se. What I'm advocating for is you need to educate your child at home and you need to have TechnoTutor. So you can see what it does with my kids. If you go to my YouTube channel and check it out, I mean, you might already be on my YouTube channel if you're watching this video on YouTube, but for the ones on the Facebook live stream, go check out my YouTube channel. You'll see videos of other people that are using TechnoTutor. It's not just me and my kids. You see other parents. You see other young adults who are entrepreneurs using it. And it's helping them because they got the same education as everybody else. We were educated to be slaves. We were not educated to be free-thinking entrepreneurs. But that's what our country was based on. I founded upon was small business. And right now what we're seeing with the coronavirus is all of that is being destroyed and limited. And now they're coming for the homeschooling. They're coming for everything. Okay, when I say they, I just mean anybody who's in any way trying to keep the government in control of what we do with our lives. Now, I'm not a person who's against government. I think, though, that the proper role of government is more administration and maintaining the balance to make sure that everybody has what they need. And that if people are going without, that there should be systems in place to address that imbalance. But it should not be at the expense of people being able to freely choose. I know that if people are educated effectively, they will choose what is best. So the argument that people will just do whatever they want and go crazy, again, I'm not saying there shouldn't be any form of government, but the government should not be government. It should be administration of systems that we've all agreed to, which would be more like a direct democracy, which is not possible currently because our education is so low. And I talk about that in many of my videos. And there's many other people that talk about this as well. Like in Athens, ancient Greece, they had a direct democracy, but I think the average IQ was like 120. So there were geniuses, not literally, but they were like all gifted intelligence. The average IQ of a teacher is about 100 to 110 at the most. So most teachers are not even gifted intelligence. How are they going to teach your child who's gifted? You know what they're going to do? They're going to say they're disruptive. They're not paying attention. Which is exactly what happens. So take a look at that. But again, my point is not to advocate homeschooling because it's kind of like, oh, you should just do whatever you want. I am suggesting there are certain things you should do to support your children. But in the context of this video, I'm only kind of leaving it as up to your curiosity. And then you can go and dig a little bit deeper into what we do and what we offer and who we are and all that. You can reach out to me and so forth. But my real point is, at the end of the day, if we want to maintain the ability to educate our children and decide, we're going to have to prove that it can be done way better, way beyond what the system can do currently. That's what we're doing with our kids. Just look at those videos, right? Where do you think my kids are going to, where do you think they're going to be at when they're 10 or 12? I mean, look at some of these videos I have. Max doing the math lesson that I talked about. Here's Max discussing like chord theory and so forth with my wife. Like he's already the smartest first grader or second grader, period. Right? And I know I'm not showing you everything right now because this video could be like 5 hours long if I did that, but go and investigate some of this and see. And go check out my videos on Facebook if you're friends with me. If you're not, friend me. I'll keep accepting friends until I hit my limit. And I'll be putting more and more things on YouTube as well. But eventually I'll probably have to go to BitChute or something because I'm sure I'll get shut down at some point, especially now that I'm really exposing things and talking about it very openly, what the problems are. But check these things out. And, if you have any desire to educate your kids at home and you're watching this video and you don't know how to do that, maybe you don't know what TechnoTutor is, that's fine. Just reach out to me and we'll support you. We'll share everything we know because we're not guessing. Like I said, we've done all the research. This is all the reading research that's been done. The handbooks of reading research, early literacy, and so forth. There's tons of other books that I've read and studied on education system, cognitive psychology, child psychology, education theory, everything. We've read all the research. And the thing is, even if you do current 2018, 2019, 2020 reading research, they're still arguing at Oxford about what's the best way to teach a kid. When my kids can already read, when my 1.5-year-old, in terms of their reading ability, is already at the end of kindergarten in terms of the 100% most ideal standard for a kindergarten, and she's only 1.5. And my 3.5-year-old, if I put my son in school, when he's 5 or 6, he will immediately be punished and put into whatever and said he's ADHD and all this stuff. And it's not because he can't focus. Like when you meet my son, he can sit and have an adult conversation with you, and he's 3.5, with real vocabulary, not just listening and pretending. But why do I say he would be punished and put on ADHD? Because he would be extremely bored if he was forced to sit down and do something that he already knows. So with my son, I'm constantly, and my wife, we're constantly teaching him new things and explaining new things. I just heard them downstairs while I was up here in my office. I could hear, I can always kind of hear what they're doing down there. And I heard her discussing with him, she just bought him a bunch of new pencils and crayons and stuff and some paper. And they were discussing him making his own math book, for practicing math and stuff like that, right? So a lot more is possible than maybe parents realize, and you don't need to have a teaching degree and all that stuff to educate your children at home. So I'm not claiming that we're homeschooling my kids. We're not. We're educating them. It's a big difference. Will my kids understand algebra and calculus? Yeah, because I do. I mean, you can't see my top shelf, but I've got all the math and chemistry and all that stuff, and I've got more books that don't fit on this shelf, obviously, but I understand it, so why wouldn't my kids understand it? And here's the thing, as a parent, you might be like, oh, but I don't know chemistry. There's tons of videos on YouTube of parents, or not parents, but people who are really good at explaining it. It's all right there. But if your child can't process the information, like in other words, if you were like, yeah, but if I went to read it and study it, it would be hard for me. That's simply a lack of processing ability. It's nothing to feel bad about, but that's exactly what TechnoTutor will support you with. And I've got plenty of videos on my TechnoTutor experiences from real people or something like that playlist on there on my YouTube channel. You can go check out as well, where they're saying, I'm an adult and I'm using it, and holy crap, my life has totally changed because of that. Because when you start working with the foundation of your life, which is your ability to process and comprehend your world, your environment, other people, express yourself, etc., then you change everything in your life. This is the key to restoring not only America, but the world to a level of greatness, or maybe bringing it to a level of greatness that's never existed. That's not top-down control. It's everybody becoming equal to their full potential and having a world where we actually can give as we want to receive. Because only by sorting out the problems in this world will we be able to have that. And it won't happen through some top-down system where we're deliberately keeping everybody dumb. But we have now the technology to support everyone in the world. It's not going to start with everyone in the world. It's going to start with a few like we have already. But it's going to grow from there. And so we have a lot more bigger picture plans in terms of going beyond even what we do with education into politics and all that. And you can check that out on my video called The Big Picture, which is on my discussions about reality playlist, where I talk to Mitch about that. Okay, so I'm going to leave it at that. This was my first long live stream that I've done and shown videos and stuff, so hopefully that went well, and I hope you enjoyed it. And feel free to leave me some comments or feedback, and share this video. Please share it, because you never know who you might impact with it. I'm only sharing things that will support people to take their children and their own education to the next level, which is dearly, sorely, extremely needed in this current world, especially considering what's going on now. We don't know how much time we have until things get to a point of consequence where it's going to be really shitty for everybody. So I hope you enjoy, and I will see you next time. All right, take care.